All right. You sent it across? Welcome, everybody.
Is that going to be Phil?
Oh, yeah, Phil. It will be Phil, yeah. Welcome, everybody at home. We're just waiting for Phil Jenkins to walk into the room. The Reverend Phil Jenkins. Tonight's study is on living in the last days. And I'll wait. Welcome if you've never been before. Welcome if you're here again and again and again. And we're all on a different journey and we're all at different stages in knowing things. So it doesn't matter if anything's wrong. We're in it together. Doesn't matter if you don't know your way around the Bible. We'll help each other. And there's contents pages and all sorts. Welcome, Alan. Not Phil Jenkins.
Well, can't put the lucid on.
You don't get that light off the buggy because you're quite dark on the screen.
No, that's usually on. The problem is I forgot how to make the camera be brighter.
Okay.
White balance issues.
Okay.
So, tonight's study, everybody, is about living in the last days. And I'm going to do a fair bit of talking. Then I'm going to give us an exercise. And it's the exercise is what really matters. All right? So this is a bit where I do a bit of talking. There's a very complicated Bible study that I could have given and can give if you want, because I've written it and I got it, but I don't want to do it. And that's about all of the end time views that Christians have and have fights over. Okay? And I'm not going to do it. I want to keep things a bit more general. But I'm going to give a summary of that. So here's a summary of a more complicated Bible study about views about the end of the world according to Christianity. Some people have a view called non-millennialism. Have you ever heard of that? Or it's also called amillennialism, meaning non. A as in A, as in Greek, as in non.
You have to get your dentist in to say it.
Here's what this means, and lots of Christians hold this view, that the world is full of both good and evil. And then Jesus is going to come back, and he's going to judge everybody, and then you'll enter your eternal state. That's our millennialism, basically. Okay? Right. There's another view called post-millennialism. Have you heard of that? If you watch the God channels, you will have heard of this. This is what they believe that the Bible teaches about the end of the world. Things are going to get better and things are going to become a lot more Christian. That'll be a sign of the end of the world is coming. Then Jesus will return and then he'll judge and everybody will enter their eternal state. Post-millennialism. Right? Then there's a last main view, and that's a major oversimplification, by the way. And then there's a last view called pre-millennialism. Have you heard of that? So post and pre-millennialism. This is what they believe the Bible teaches. That in the last days, sin and chaos and unpleasantness is going to go from bad to worse. And that will be the sign that the end of all times is coming. Then there's going to be something called a rapture, where God's people float away for a while. Then there's something on the back of that called the tribulation. Then Jesus returns. Then he hangs around for 1,000 years. He's got a little kingdom and he's reigning. Then he's going to judge everybody and then people enter the eternal state. All right? I'm not going there. But I will tell you some of my problems with all of that. Problem number one. And I've read all the literature. In fact, I was reading stuff today. I think it all misses the point because they all argue about it. And hardly anyone ever gets excited that Jesus is returning. He just gets lost in the arguments. I think that's a shame. My other problem is people approach the book of Revelation in a way that I don't think is right. And I think Revelation works in circles. And it teaches that Jesus defeats evil and wins the world for his bride. And then it does it again in another picture of a circle, but it's the same story. Then it does it again, it's another picture in a cycle of the same story. But some people read Revelation as a progression of events, and I don't. And I think you can get in a bit of a pickle if you read Revelation in progression. Welcome, Phil. For those at home, Phil is arriving.
It's a very strange episode in my car, but not for now.
Not for now. Do you want a tea or coffee? We'll sort you, Phil. All right.
That's okay, I can do it.
Someone do it. Maggie, she wanted it. Go on, Maggie. What do you want, Phil?
White coffee, please, with a little sugar. And
One. He has one. I know it. I know what he is. So Jesus often gets forgotten in the end of the world debates. Revelation gets interpreted strangely. The other thing that happens with Revelation is some groups decide, oh, I'm going to take that bit literally, and that bit not literally. That's an allegory. And it becomes quite inconsistent. And you find that in these debates. In fact, some people read Revelation and they will tell you that the COVID vaccine is in the book of Revelation and possibly in the book of Daniel 7. And because of that, we know the end of the world is coming. And I'll tell you another thing. Because you've got credit cards now and not cash, a cashless society is prophesied in Revelation, and it's a sign of the end of the world. And on and on and on these interesting applications go. And Jesus gets forgotten. And then my last big problem with the whole floating away thing for a while, and like just non-Christians get left behind and we float away, and there's movies about this and children's cartoons and books, is the whole of the Bible is about church inheriting the world, not floating away. So when the Holy Spirit gets poured out, Christians don't vanish. They're very grounded and they love each other and they share and they enjoy things on planet Earth. And that's what Leviticus 23 is about in Acts chapter 2. And in Matthew 5, who does Jesus say inherits the earth? The meek, not the wicked. In Romans chapter 8, it says there are animals and trees and they're all looking forward to Jesus coming back and restoring the earth. And in Isaiah 11 and 65, it's about animals living with each other again on the earth and all sin has been removed. And I'm not into floating away. Anyway, that's everything I just said, you could say for hours and hours on. But we're not doing that today, everybody, because we're keeping it simples. I want us to be ready for the end of the world and not get too sidetracked. And some of those things are important, by the way, but we ain't doing it tonight. So, living in the last days in a helpful way for Park End Church. According to the Bible, everybody, we live in the last days. And I just want you to take 1 minute and chat amongst yourselves, or scribble on a piece of paper if you don't want to talk to anybody. Like, what are the last days, do you think? Like I just said, according to the Bible, we're living in the last days. What do you think about that phrase? Do you agree? Do you disagree? You got any thoughts on living in the last days? So take a minute. So Jeff, you now do the discussion tab and send it across. You sent it across, Jeff? Oh, Jeff. I'm training Jeff on the he's already trained, it seems. Anyway, take a minute and I'll come round with the biscuits. End times, last days. What does it mean? Oh, you're thinking, are you? I thought you dismissed it. Oh, you're deep in thought.
C'est pas mal.
He's had about 6 already. He's not right anymore.
Wow.
Jesus has ascended, and so it's the last days before then.
return. I'm going to try that one. Thank you.
This isn't going to put me off my tea, don't worry.
Phil, are you a pre or post millennialist? I've never asked you. I think I am as well, Phil.
I'm just saying, it's a millennium bird.
All right, Jeff, you're going to undo the discussion tab because I'm back. That was only a quick one, everybody. Don't forget, those at home, please put any questions or comments in the chat. Jeff's monitoring it tonight.
That's what I just said.
Any thoughts on what are the last days in your head? Any ideas? Doesn't matter if you're wrong.
The enemies are defeated.
The enemies are defeated. What does that mean?
Well, it means Satan and the other angels have been cast out.
All right, well, what I'm saying is, I think right now we're living in the last days. So what do I mean? Come back to that. Because what you said is probably part of it, but also right now, are we living in the last days? Anybody thoughts?
It's just that the last days started as soon as Jesus ascended, and that's why we're in the last days. The trouble is, what people think of with the last days is that this is it now. We're only a matter of days away from the end of time, whereas in fact the last days, if you think of it in terms of an eon, period of time, an epoch even, that it's between the last days are the days between Jesus' ascension and the return.
Yeah. Okay, so for those at home, someone has said that the last days are anything after Jesus died, rose and ascended. It's called the last days. Anyone else?
Well, the way I see it, going back to the point I made when you see the antisocial behaviour, and I saw on the news today people just breaking up and robbing shops for the sake of it and being planned, and there's no order. It's like as if the devil is tied up, and each period of time the chain is getting looser and looser. There's more and more power.
Okay.
But then on the other hand, what I would say about, we've heard this argument about the last days, and they say people are thinking about it. It's going to come when we're not thinking about it, because James Edwards has predicted this for I don't know how many decades or centuries, but are we thinking about it? I mean, it could be the year 11,000 on. Nobody really knows.
All right. By the way, that was pretty much a pre-mill description, like bad things happening. It looks like it's all coming to an end. All right, let me do some talking then. Then I'll give you some verses to look at. And then it's all going to the main exercise. So, the last days, I think, in the Bible refers to that period between the ascension of Jesus to the throne room of heaven and the day when he returns. In this period of history, everything is ready. It's all done. Now Jesus, he's just going to be revealed. He's the great high priest. He's taken his blood to the heavenly tabernacle. He's cleansed his people. And now we're waiting for him to come back, bringing the heaven, the earth back into the perfect unity that it once was before it got fractured apart. And all of the promises given to us are for us to be excited about that. And we don't often get excited about that. In fact, when you saw this title, you probably went, didn't you? That's why half the class haven't shown up tonight, isn't it? Yeah.
The rapture's taking place already, we missed it.
It's a secret one. Uh-oh.
And it's rock solid excitement for us. We're not going to float away, I don't think. I think the prophets in the Bible speak about desert lands becoming fertile again, and weapons becoming plows, like peace language. Animals living peacefully together. Incidentally, I met that guy yesterday who lost my dog. That's a side conversation, not to have here live on air. But I was actually in a group with him. Yeah, a discussion group. And that's how he introduced himself. Sorry, Owen, I'm the one that lost your dog.
She ran away.
I told him that. It was the dog's fault. It was an escape, yeah. And anyway, and it's about plants, like resting under plants and all this peaceful language. All right, anyway, so just to back up what I said, so these last days is a phrase that's in the Bible, but nowadays when people talk about it, a lot, Christian teachers, they tend to say these are the last few days, as in it's imminently over for us, like get ready. And they'll talk about like things happening in America, like Trump like that. It's the Antichrist and it's all over. But actually, the biblical phraseology, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means everything after the ascension of Jesus. It doesn't go much further. So I got some verses for you to look up, or someone else on your table to look up, which I think show that we are in the last days, and we have been for 2,000 years. And people have been trying to say it's all over, and they're always wrong. So far, they've been wrong. So, this group over here, can you look up Joel 2, 28 to 32, and pair it with Acts 2:17. Joel 2, 28 to 32, and Acts 2:17. You in the middle there, Jeff, can you do Hebrews 1, 2? This team there, can you do James 5, 3? And this team over here, you got an interesting one. Can you do 1 John chapter 2, verse 18? 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. Now, if you don't know what's what, like me, there's a contents page in the start of this yellow, what colour is that? Red book here. So 1 John is 12:25. What did I give you? Oh, I'll just leave you find it.
Can you repeat the Joel one, please?
Joel 2, 28 to 32. And you're pairing that with Acts 2:17. Hebrews 1, 2. You can do the discussion here, Jeff, as well, the discussion tab. And we'll be back in 2 minutes.
To the end of the chapter.
You've got 1 John 2:18. 1 John 2, verse 18, I think. You got an interesting one. Right, how's it going, Jeff?
Yeah, I referred back to them, yeah.
All good out there?
People online, 3 people online. One of them's Richard, I think.
God, it's dark, isn't it?
You didn't want to delve into the 2 Timothy 3.
You could do that if you want. I'll probably get there later.
No point. There's actually 0 point in discussing it.
1 minute. "30 seconds. The tricky thing with all those complicated views of the end of the world, they all have a point. Like they've all got verses that they hang their argument on. It's not easily dismissed, any of them. "10 seconds. Okay, welcome back everyone. Can someone read Joel 2, 28 to 32 and Acts 2:17 and just tell me is it relevant? Does it help with this thought process? Go.
Okay, the Joel. And afterward I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days. I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be deliverance, as the Lord has said, even among the survivors whom the Lord calls." Is the Joel? What was the Acts?
Acts 2:17.
Do you want to go now?
Says, "In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, your old men will dream dreams."
Okay, so there's Peter in Acts 2, and within a few weeks of Jesus going back to heaven, he quotes Joel and says, we're in the last days. These are the days that Joel's talking about, where the Spirit of God will be poured out on Jews and Gentiles in the same way. Boom, and it makes its way even to Cardiff. The last days. Okay? Right. Jeff, can we have Hebrews 1:2 out loud, please?
In these last days, he has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he created the world.
The last days are around the time where Jesus was speaking the gospel with his own words in flesh. That's called the last days. The prophets used to speak them. In fact, Jesus used to speak them in the Old Testament, but when he came as flesh, those are signified now. This is it now. This is the big one. The end. Right? And then James 5:3. Can we have that read out, please?
James 5 and verse 3. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days.
There's Jesus' earthly brother James writing about how bad it is that people store up possessions in the last days, obsessing about them instead of being ready and living in the light of the last days. He uses the term in the last days, right? Okay, 1 John 2:8.
Dear children, this is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come. This is how we know it is the last hour.
Yeah, that'll do. That'll do. So that one, that's an extreme one, because John there says, the Apostle John, this is the last hour. That's how he describes this period. It's like an hour. And he says the Antichrist is already here, which is interesting, because elsewhere it said there's another Antichrist coming. But he's like, no, there's loads of them. They're already here. There's several of them. And that's how we know this is the last period of days. All right? So all that was just to back up the point that I think we're already in the last days. So now I'm going to speak a bit more. So when people ask the question, Owen, do you think we're near the end of the world? The answer, I think, biblically, is, yeah, because Donald Trump has just become prime minister, what's he called, the president, and we don't have cash anymore. We've got apps on our phones. Instead of that, I just tend to say yes, actually, since the time of Jesus. Yeah. Like, since the time of the apostles writing in the 1st century AD, it's the last days. So I think we're very, very near to the end of everything. But what does very, very near mean? I don't know, it's been 2,000 years. But it does seem to be that the people in the Bible seem to think we're now in history's last final phase. Whatever that means. Everything has been leading up to Jesus, his birth, his life, his cross, his resurrection, and his ascension. And now it's as if there's only one thing left for him to do, and that is to return, recreate the world, and then there's nothing left on God's agenda. Now, I'm going to read something that I've read so many times and I don't understand it. But I'm going to read it anyway, because apparently it's helpful. One writer expressed it with this kind of image, as if all history is racing towards the edge of a cliff and is about to plunge over into Judgment Day, into eternity, into the age to come. But once we get to the point where Jesus has died, risen and ascended, history stops and runs along the edge of the cliff and at any moment can plunge over and carry on again. I don't understand that, but it sounds good. Someone nodded or grunted in agreement. What does it mean? Apparently that's a helpful picture. What is the picture?
Don't think I can express it in terms of what it says there. But yeah, if you imagine that you were running towards a cliff, edge, and instead of going over the edge, you take a left or a right and you go along the top of the. Right. At any point, you could deviate and go back. So that point of going back over the edge will be
The return.
the return,
Okay.
is how I would picture it, yeah.
All things will come together and follow the same path for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
When Lemmings,
Lemmings, I used to play that on the Sega
when
Mega Drive.
Lemmings head for the cliff, they don't stop, they go over the cliff.
Over the cliff. Yeah.
When I think we're sinful, we're almost heading for a cliff. But Jesus, because he died for our sins,
Yeah.
we are sort of stopped from falling over the cliff.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Difficult.
All right. So this is why Jesus is always saying in his teaching, be ready, keep watch. And one of the most common ways in the Bible of referring to the end of the world is his appearing is coming. Right. I'm going to say a bit more, and then I'm going to give you the task of the evening, which might be a big anticlimax. But a few more words from me. Sorry I'm talking so a lot tonight. So Jesus could return at any moment. Everything that needs to happen has already happened. Jesus himself tells us to be ready, and the big exercise at the end is, how do we help each other get ready if we're not ready? Because he could return as a thief in the night. Incidentally, Jesus does list a few extra things that will start happening nearer the time that he comes, but I don't want to get into that. I just want us to be ready that he generally is coming at some point. The Antichrist, there's loads on that. I'm parking all that, but that might be a sign of his coming, this big rebellion. The temple and what happens with that, I'm parking that. The restoration of the Jews back to their Messiah, I'm parking all that. Those are the other study that we can do one day. I want us to realize it's all gearing for us receiving and enjoying the new creation where we stand on the renewed earth without cancer and anger and cellulitis and Alzheimer's and decay and death. And before we get to the exercise of the day, the church in Thessalonica, that Paul wrote to, they were ready for the second coming of Christ, and they started asking questions in church like this. What about people that have died before Christ returns? Well, are they going to get involved in the big last day? What of those who have fallen asleep and died? Are they going to get in on the action when Christ returns? And so Paul addresses that question, and I just want us to do that. So please, everybody, turn to page 1187. 1187.
I've got page numbers on my app.
Oh, sorry, yeah. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Because I like that 2,000 years ago, there's a group of people basically meeting like we are, asking the questions that we are. I find that exciting. So 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 to 18. So just take 2 minutes and scan 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 13 to 18, and just note anything that Paul says about people who are worried about what's going to happen when Jesus returns. Right? Jeff, you do the wangly thing on there, and we'll be back in 2 minutes, and I'll do a whip around. The little I button. Ooh. Gone. Where's it gone, Jeff? Where's it gone? Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it?
I got you sorted, Jeff. Don't worry about anything, mate. 1 minute. Okay, right, welcome back everyone. So 1 Thessalonians 4:13 to 18, Paul gets involved on trying to help a church with living in the last days. Anything strike anybody about this topic from that chunk?
Is this people that talk about rapture, is that what they're referring to?
No. Well, yes and no. This talks about meeting in the air. And a non-millennialist would just mean that's an instant thing, like quick, one and done. On the back of the rapture people, that's a postponed, lengthy period where they go for quite some time indeed. Years. So no. And they base that less on this and more on passages in Daniel and Revelation. Anything strike anybody?
The dead in Christ will rise first.
The dead in Christ will rise first. Yes. Anything else? I guess that's it, is it?
The Lord himself will come down.
Yeah.
Right, and we go up.
Yeah, there's a bit of up.
What about meeting the crowd?
So the Thessalonian church seemed to be anxious about Christians that already died. If they had fallen asleep and died and Jesus was returning, then are they going to miss out? Paul basically explains that Jesus will bring with him those that have fallen asleep. And we meet them. Anyway, all that to say, we ain't missing out. He goes on in chapter 5, you can read this as homework, about people are resurrected also for judgment. For judgment. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the point of tonight's study. I think we're living in the last days. But we're in a society that doesn't care and doesn't think about it. We're in a church which largely, probably, if we're honest, doesn't really care or think about it that much. We get awfully distracted. So I'm parking the academic stuff. If this stuff is real, and it hangs on Jesus whether it is or not, and he's got a pretty good batting average for telling the truth. If this is real, then we don't need an academic study. We need to be excited and also help people get excited and ready and trusting in the Lord for that great day where the wickedness of this world is gone and dealt with and the sadness and the tears are wiped away. It's like this is our thing. This is what we're in this for. And I don't think we get excited enough. So, here is something that I've been looking forward to sharing with you that I think now might be a big flop. But I've been chatting to my friend about the age groups in church and how we think things through differently. So I'm like, right, I got a study on the end times. How do we get everyone excited? Because on Sunday, there's an age range from, who's the youngest in church? Finley. How old is he? 8 months?
Yeah.
And who's the oldest? We got someone who's 100 in April, haven't we? And did you know that everybody thinks differently and responds differently, and we're to get them all excited? How do you do that? Because I think we're failing there. So I'm going to tell you some interesting things about age generations that I was chatting through with my friend with. And he's done all the research basically for me. So, and this matters because you're going to be sitting by someone who thinks a certain way and gets excited in certain ways. And if we don't convey this, we're not going to really get excited as a church. And then the community's not going to get excited. So in my head, this is important. So I want to tell you some things about age differences, and then I'm going to tell you, well, how do we reach that type of person with the good news, and how do we, and that, right? Ready? So, generations. Born 1925 to 1945, they are now 80 years old or more. Do you know what they're called as a generation? As a generation.
Boomers.
Not boomers. They are called, they're called the silent generation. Also known as the resilient generation. I'm going to unpack why in a minute, but right, the next one down, and we've got quite a lot of those in Park End. Incidentally, in my last church in the Valleys, even though it was only 30 minutes up the road, the average age lifespan drops dramatically. Like I'm talking 20 years in a 30-minute drive for all sorts of social reasons. Anyway, the next generation down is 1946, born 1946 to 1964, who are now aged 60 to 80. What are they called? They're the boomers. If we were really like personal, we'd say, put your hand up which generation you're in, but we're not going to do that. The next generation down, and we've got loads of them in Park End. The next generation down are born 1965 to 1980. They are 45 to 60 now. What are they called? Gen X. You're good at this, Nick. Gen X. The next one down are born, and we've got those in the church. Probably that's our biggest. Age 45 to 60?
No, I would say the one about
60 to 80, you think?
yeah.
Wow. The next one down are born 1981 to 1994. They're in their 30s. What are they called? Nope. Well, maybe, but they're known by something more. Millennials. That's me. The next one down, 1995 to 2012. They're in their 20s. What are they called? Gen Z.
We're not American. Jen said, I agree with you, mate. Yeah, we're not American.
And then the most recents, which are 2013 to current, so they're age 0 to 11. Do you know what they're called?
No, Gen
Alpha. Gen Alpha or Polar. Because they're in the age where the polar ice caps are melting. And apparently it's going to have it's going to shape them.
Generation wet.
Generation wet. So, we've got all of those in our church and our community. Hardly anyone's excited about the end days or the coming of the Lord. This is like where the rubber hits the road, because each generation communicates and responds differently. And here's an overgeneralized summary of how each generation operates. Here's how the silent generation are marked as generally. They keep calm and carry on, generally. They're resilient. They rarely, if ever, discuss their mental health or their spiritual state. In fact, I'm going to tell you all of the marks, and then we'll break it down one by one to end. Here's the boomers. Generally, they are the generation that started to be individuals way more than the previous generation. They pushed boundaries. The divorce rate went higher, and kids were born a lot more out of wedlock than the silent generation. They are actually, and they have become and still are, the powerhouse in politics and often in church life and leadership. So US presidents, prime ministers, church leaders, they've usually been boomers. They're between 60 and 80. Gen X, also our brothers and sisters in church. They invented the internet. And they are generally quite cynical and slow to trust people or ideas. They were the first generation to earn the name slackers. They point at the next generation and call them slackers, because the term's in society now, but they were the first generation to be called it. Generally, they're politically apathetic. They're slow to take leadership. And there's not many deacons and elders in Gen X, in church life. They knew the pre-digital age and the post-digital age, and they're the only generation that can say that. But there's not many leaders in them. So in church leadership particularly, you've got older guys or younger guys, not much of Gen X. I'm going to circle back to that in a minute of why that matters. Then we got the millennials, me. This generation was the first generation that got given trophies in sports tournaments, not for winning, but for taking part. Yeah. It's no longer for us about winning the race. It was just that we showed up and we got lavished with gifts. And it's the boomers that pick up on that, but it's also the boomers that raised this generation. So there's a bit of inconsistency. Like the very same generation that call millennials saps are the ones that raised the saps. So they're not entirely without the blame. Birth control is big among the millennials. So these kids were wanted because you could elect to choose or not, whether to keep them or not, more than ever. And this term self-esteem was born for this generation, millennials. It's in our mind. And if you look at the books, which reveal a lot about the generation, individual pronouns became more prevalent than we and us in the literature. The literature got flooded with I and me more than any other generation of literature before. And that shapes how you think and operate. There were more of them going to university, and as a result, they're slower to grow up because they ain't in the working world yet. For them, social media has been very prevalent. And this term adulting has been coined for them in a derogatory way. We don't want to become adults. We know what that's like. No, I'll stay here in uni. It's a bad thing to grow up. Gen Z. They have known no years before social media. There was no life for them before social media. And with them, you get increased individualism. On the back of that has become, who am I? I get to be anything I want, even biologically. That's been big for them. So you've got this fluidity that is available to them in all areas of life, Gen Z. Pornography and smartphones, massive issue for this generation. Slower to grow up. And with this generation, and this matters in church, for Gen Z, if they hear an opposite opinion, it's no longer wrong, but it's harmful to me and my mental health that you hold that opinion. Okay? These are the marks of this generation. So the phrases coined around this generation have been safe spaces and trigger warnings. You're triggering me. And they need pushing more than any other generation to learn to drive. They have a massive racial consciousness. They're generally dissatisfied and depressed. And they're very vocal about their mental health and spiritual well-being. Popularity for them is just a number on a phone, usually linked to likes or follows. And as a generation, they're generally pessimistic. Incidentally, though, they're less likely to be killed by accidents outside because they're so often inside. So like road traffic vehicle accidents and things have dropped massively with this generation. But as a result, they're unhealthy through physical inactivity and poor diet. So they've become known as the anxious generation, which leaves the alpha and polars, where all of the data is yet to be confirmed, but they're probably going to be an anxious generation because we haven't stopped doing the things that cause the anxious generation to be the anxious generation. Plus they got melting ice caps and climate change apparently, which apparently is going to harm them. So the last couple of minutes, a rapid fire. When you sit next to someone on Sunday, and apparently we're all heading towards the end of the world and it's something to be excited about for a Christian and everything's going to be remade, and the person next to you is a silent generation, resilient, who doesn't talk about their mental health and their spiritual state. This is where church actually exists in this sphere. How are you going to get someone to live in the light of the last days? Let's just shout out answers per generation and then we'll be done. Any answers? This is my life now. I'm looking to you for help. They're less likely to talk. They might even think that talking about their private feelings is morally wrong. What are you going to do? Jesus is coming. Should we talk about it? You want to come around my house for a one-on-one pastoral session? What are you going to do? Welcome to my world. This is the silent generation in this room.
Yeah. Take a leaf out of their book.
I don't know, but I do know this. They'd rather company than deep words. And they like to be taken on a journey in life rather than lectured. And you're going to rub shoulders with people in this community and in this church who respond better to cups of tea than absolute Bible lectures. And we got to get each other excited because Jesus is coming. Well, thanks for your help, guys. Let's move on to the boomers.
No, to introduce this topic to anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, there is a generation. There is a generation where you can say that to. And this is all to do with our witness and sharing our faith. And the boomer generation, individuals, push boundaries, high divorce rate, kids out of lectures, generally church leaders and US presidents. 60 to 80s. What are you going to do? This is where this experiment falls apart, because are there any answers, really?
Well, it's like asking Nancy Beck to predict the numbers that are going to win the lottery, isn't it?
Right.
She never wouldn't know herself.
I don't know the answer to that, really. 60 to 80. We got a community meal on Sunday. It matters.
Well, the big question is we've got resources, we've got time. A lot of us are financially stable, retired. So what are we on earth? Why are we still here? You know, when we're stable and we're cut to heaven, we could have been, we're not.
Yeah.
So we have a job to fulfill while we're here, and what is it, and how are we doing it?
Exactly, and people are real, and they function in certain ways. They're products of their environments, and so we need to be wise in how we serve people. Right, Gen X, the slackers, political apathy. Not many leaders among them. They knew the pre- and post-digital world. Hardly any leaders in this generation. So lack of responsibility, maybe. I don't know, it's a tough question, isn't it? I've sort of made it difficult. I'm just trying to get you to think like I do.
Nobody wants that.
No.
Shall we quote Jeff Cresswell?
No, don't do that, yeah.
It's a sort of question that would be very difficult to raise with an individual you're sitting next to,
Yeah.
but it's very much a question that you could talk about from the pulpit. And, you know, you could throw out some things like, so say you're talking to the silent generation, you say that whatever we consider the definition of the last days, you will be meeting your Lord shortly.
Yeah.
Because if you're 80 plus,
Yep.
your lifespan is not.
Wow, Nick.
You know. But what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
it's more of an urgent question, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, exactly. This is what I'm doing it. It's like, because they don't like talking about things generally.
But isn't there a difference between dying and the end times?
Yeah,
Well, in one sense there is, and in one sense there isn't.
yeah.
You get to be with Jesus,
As soon as you die, you're gonna be.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
And we'll be resurrected first.
Yeah.
I will be resurrected.
And we'll be resurrected first, according to one of the earlier readings.
Yeah. 1 Thessalonians 4. There's a lady that I walk past every day on the school run. Well, the days that I do the school run, Tuesday and Thursday. She's bedbound, I think, because she's there when I go and she's there at the end of the school run when I walk back. She's just in bed. She looks like she's this generation. And I don't know, I've had all this in mind and the seriousness of the end times and reaching people, and I think I'm going to write on a piece of paper and press it up against the window, would you like me to come and read to you or something? She looks totally bedbound and bored. Anyway, I'm just throwing out ideas about how to love people and serve them where they're at. Thing is, if you get that wrong, it looks a bit weird, doesn't it? But I know people who read at the side of elderly people's beds, just like normal books, and it leads to great friendships, important conversations. And then we better close this. We're going a bit off here, aren't we? But millennials, trophy for taking part. They don't want to be adults. What are you going to do? Big on social media. Connect on devices, having an online presence. Misspell words on WhatsApp to look cool. Down with the people. And Gen Z, very vocal about where they're at. And actually, wasn't the Telegraph last week showing there's a huge spike in interest in religion among Gen Z in Britain at the moment? Huge. Because they are searching and looking, and they're willing to talk and to chat. So I don't know, that was the experiment I wanted to do at the end. If nothing else, I just want us to realize that people are people, and we've got a good message, and not one size fits all, and go share your life and your love with people. And I just thought in my head that would be more useful if I had done a huge whopping academic study on, I don't know, the rapture, which we can do another time. So probably more confusing than helpful tonight, but maybe later on tonight you'll go, oh no, then maybe that was important. I don't know.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Please? You were talking about the pre-millennial, amillennial, post-millennial, and all of the arguments like that. Surely, isn't it all rendered irrelevant by Mark 13:32?
Right. Have you got that there?
Yeah, but about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Which then goes on to be on guard, be alert. You don't know when that time will come. And it goes on to give an example. And then keep watch because you don't know when the owner of the house will come back. So, I'm not saying, obviously, it is going to happen and we need to be ready for it. But I think that wasting a lot of time arguing about it or discussing it. I'm not saying what we've done tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, all of those research and so on that's gone on with all those different ideas, that really they could have been doing something better with their time, like sharing the love of Jesus with everybody.
And that's my problem. I think these things are important, but Jesus so often gets left behind when we talk about them.
Another way of looking at this is two major groups of people in the world. One is those who have the power to change the world, which they do through laws and actions, and there's influencers. So which age group are the people who are passing these terrible laws, and can they be targeted?
Chet?
Which group are the age of influencers who can influence them to make a change?
Yeah, generally it's the boomers and the millennials running those types of decisions. But I mean, what are we going to do? We just got the people in front of us to love and share church life with them, and then hopefully some of them will be policy makers, and they in turn will influence their colleagues, and it goes like that.
Sorry,
Go on.
but don't you think, I mean, I think it's fairly, again, how we categorising all these people, but down through the centuries, right to today, essentially human nature is the same, and human needs are the same.
Yeah.
We might express it in different ways, but
Yeah.
we need to address those basic questions of life and of purpose and of who am I, and all these are great metaphysical questions.
100%. We are all basically the same, but the slight expressions on how you have those conversations vary from the generations, and we can be aware of who's in front of us. Because you might be in front of an old person and think, well, there's no spiritual life in them at all, they're dead. But it's actually, it's that they're not used to sharing. Oh well, people are people, God is God, and Jesus saves. Next week, we're actually going to look at the new creation and what that is, God willing. So in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. If we could, are we setting up the room for the men's breakfast, or what's happening? Because I don't know what format that's going to take. Should we just put things back in the cupboard?
And just put everything away we would normally do.
Okay.
Safest. If we haven't been asked to do anything else, then yeah.
Stop streaming. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, brilliant.